One. So Steve, thanks for coming on the show. Steve, you're a filmmaker and also an actor, and you're mostly in the Virginia area, but I take it you're in Minneapolis today.
Yeah, I'm actually here visiting my fiance.
Awesome. So Steve, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and what you've been up to in these crazy days.
Well, about 10 years ago, I got involved in the production end of filmmaking. Prior to that, I had experience in acting, theater work, stuff like that, and I did some commercial work, but really wanted to tell my own stories. So got involved in production, directing, cinematography, and still do some acting. So that's mostly what I do, and mostly independent film work or working with other production companies is pretty much the way I roll.
Awesome. So how would you say you've been impacted recently with this shelter in place, the quarantine, just the current state of affairs we're in?
A lot of production stuff's been put on hold, of course, just because safety reasons. You have to make sure that everybody and locations shut down. Things that we had originally planned to shoot were no longer available, and we needed to wait, not just safety reasons, but safety reasons for the businesses or locations that we were going to use. So that was definitely a big effect. We just got back into production. We've done a number of Batman fan films that kind of generate a lot of buzz and draw a lot of potential viewers for other films. And we just resumed production on that again last month. And it was just a couple of scenes at a location that we knew we would be isolated enough and could control what was going on enough to make sure that everybody would be safe. So, and that was a different experience. I've never been on set with a bunch of people wearing medical masks before. So, this is my fiance, HALEH.
Hello. Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, HALEH, how would you say you've been? Did I pronounce that right, HALEH?
Yes, correct.
Oh wow, I'm an expert name pronouncer, but
yeah, a lot of people call her Haley for some reason, even though it's clearly not that. But yeah, you got it right the first time.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've traveled quite a bit, so I've been able to make those mistakes already early in life. But how would you say you've been impacted? Maybe we can start off professionally right now, these current state of affairs. Can you hear me?
I couldn't hear your question.
Oh, he's asking how you were impacted by COVID-19.
Oh, COVID. Do we even want to talk about that? Well, I'm a nurse, and I was in a very close contact with COVID patients because I worked in a COVID unit for about, I believe, 3 months. And so for me, was having a job or going to work was not an issue, but the thing I've seen and experienced, it was very, very heartbreaking. And since I became a nurse in 2015, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
How much I can say.
It's just one second. There we go. Yeah, I mean, it's just been an overdrive. The patients and all the other issues, going on, and as far as artists and actors and filmmakers, what would you say is next on your agenda as far as productions, trying to find a workaround or a production hack?
Yes, we are. We started planning on working our next project which is the last generation. It's called. We are just trying to make it work to make a short concept to just get it out there and introduce it to audience and see how it goes. But that is our next project that will be my first project with Steve. And I'm very excited because I will be working with talents in East Coast for the first time, and I'm looking forward to it. And part of it is going to film in Minnesota, which I am located at. But then most of it we're going to film in probably Virginia, Washington D.C., and that area. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, great. And Steve, what about you?
Yeah, Last Generation is our next big upcoming thing, and and we're figuring out definitely some production hacks for it to keep things going. Figuring out ways to do locations with a smaller crew, smaller amounts of actors, so we don't have everybody crowded together and we don't have to worry about anything. And of course, kind of negotiating that with people who are letting us into the locations, because they want to be sure that we're not going to put anybody at risk there, or you know, it's just a different environment than it was obviously the last pretty much most of the years that most of us have been filmmaking. It's a completely different world to do it in. And Last Generation is sort of a post-apocalyptic film. It's after a worldwide plague has struck, and it follows a main character and her moral decisions that she's had to face with a lot of it. So it's just a 7-minute concept that we hope to develop into a series, and we were planning on doing it sooner, but like I mentioned with the Batman stuff, a lot of things had to be on hold. So this is kind of the forefront, and I'm finishing up the Batman stuff with a different director. I do a little bit of co-direction and some set design and other stuff in the background with that too. So yeah, I kind of end up in all aspects, whether I intend to or not.
Right. Yeah. And it's tricky that, you know, watching these kind of projects. I just finished a film on a Netflix original film called Only, which is right down our alley as far as what we're going through, what we're dealing with right now. And you know, it's frustrating. A lot of these films, as you know, post-apocalyptic films, dystopian films, deal with like, you know, The Walking Dead and like Mad Max type movies. It puts in question, you know, a lot of moral and ethical dilemmas of survival and what comes first and outweighing options. And, you know, I chose to, you know, stay away from a lot of those kind of, you know, pieces in the last 6 months. I chose to watch this for whatever reason, like the trailer. And so I watched it, and I found myself getting very frustrated, and actually more than other projects, putting myself inside this film and thinking, and it comes down to the littlest things. It comes down to the littlest things, like someone points a gun at me and ties me up. You know, how do I get out of this situation? How do I run, or how do I defend myself? Am I going to be able to, you know, do that Jackie Chan move and grab that gun out of his hand, or you know, do those slick moves and get out of a restraints, whatever the restraints are. And it's like it got down to the little micro things that I had to put it on pause. I had to, like, you know, come back another day, and it took me, you know, maybe 48 hours to watch this movie. And it was, and especially, you know, even to make matters even worse. And I want to touch upon the fact that you guys are in Minneapolis, and so I know that's a hotbed for quite a bit of things going on right now. I mean,
well, I was visiting her 2 months ago when literally the riots had just broken out.
Yeah.
And I remember we saw it looked like that looked post-apocalyptic when we rode through one area where all the businesses were destroyed, boards were up everywhere. Basically there was, things were on fire, and no law enforcement present whatsoever. It was just, you know, you had to be really careful. We left the area pretty quick, and then as we were riding out of that or near that area at one point, we saw a National Guard all lined up to come into the area. It was like 2 or 3 days later, something like that. And that was interesting to see, but we didn't actually get close to it until it was about a week and a half in. I remember we could hear rioters and protesters, which there's a difference. I mean, obviously some people are protesting peacefully, and then there's people that, you know, there's rioting going on and just looting and damage. And we could hear some, I think it was probably protesters, because there was a very minimal police presence and nothing happened. It was just pretty peaceful, but it was literally one street over from where we were. And they were marching down towards where some businesses were. And I think that's about as close as we got physically, probably, to it. But, you know, I mean, you support the cause of it. At the same time, you have to kind of maintain your distance and be careful, because there's a lot of volatility going on too. So yeah, for safety reasons, you know, just trying to be careful. I actually watched a guy who did a short film. I shared it online. He did a short film in Texas where he was filming a lot of scenes on some of the empty streets. I think it was in Austin, and using that as a backdrop, just because he could go out and do that, and he wouldn't have any contact with anybody because nobody was out. Yeah. And he made a pretty incredible film that got shared on Film Riot and some of the other places. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention stuff. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was going to mention, you know, did you grab a DSLR or not, or you know, a smartphone, go out there and pick up some B-roll? You know, and that's tempting. We saw lots of people online had done that. They were getting footage of everything that was going on, whether it was crazy or not, you know, just jumping in there and doing that. No, we didn't actually go out and do that. And I know that in Richmond, Virginia, which is close to where I live, there's still a lot of craziness still going on with everything. So a few people I know there are snapping pictures of what's going on and getting footage, but yeah, I mean, the best you can do is, I know right now, like you said, these are volatile times, and it's a serious time, and it's important to take it seriously. And it's not a cash grab. It's not, but at the same time, artists like ourselves, especially me, I don't want to say that I'm quick to take advantage of a shitty situation, but at the same time, as an artist, for the past 5 months, I've been trying to figure out production hacks and finish up some projects that I have, and now it's like, hey, maybe this is an opportunity to, you know, if it's safe, you know, the damage is done. I'm obviously not going to partake in anything illegal. I'll want to obviously be safe myself, but go out there with a camera and get some stuff that could be used for something down the road, because, you know, CGI aside, you know, that's expensive, and extras and props and practical effects, you know, that's all expensive. So with all that aside, it is somewhat of an opportunity to, you know, if the streets are empty, like you said, huh? Yeah, get a lot of background for that too, especially, you know, you've got some of the stuff we saw. I mean, like vehicles on fire and things like that, and you know, people aren't close enough to be completely discernible in the camera, so you don't have to worry about getting releases. And I mean, right. Yeah, I guess it depends on the state. You know, if you're out in public, shooting out in public, then you don't need releases. But I know it depends on the state. So it does, and you know, that is an interesting idea. You know, but at the same time, I don't know that I would. She and I would go out and do that. I would probably do it with a nice, you know, zoom lens, and be careful instead of jumping in the middle of, like, getting tear gassed with everybody else. And super long telephoto lens. Absolutely. Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I kind of touched upon it, but anything you guys have been watching, keep your mind off things, streaming anything, movies, series, maybe some books that you've just used to escape? Oh, how long do you have? Well, I mean, one of the things I've been doing a lot is remote working and doing editing and just dropping things in and out of Dropbox to get stuff done. I was working on her demo reel coming up, and finishing stuff on one of the other Batman projects we did. And so there's been ways to keep working doing that, because I do a lot of editing too, so that helps. And God, like when we've been getting together and whenever we're not working on film stuff or trying to get things going like that, we've been oh God, how many things have we watched? I mean, I'm sure everybody has probably she watched all of Daredevil with me.
Oh wow, okay.
It was on Netflix. We watched all of that. Let's see, we
caught up pretty much with Vikings.
Right, yeah, we ended up watching Vikings. She enjoyed that, the one that was done by History Channel.
Mm-hmm.
But it did pretty well. You know, we ended up catching completely up on that, so we're waiting for that to release the last, I think the second part of season 6, and we'll probably catch up on that. And quite a few films and movies. She actually likes a lot of the action movies too, so we'll watch quite a bit of that. And then the other day, what did we watch? The Health.
So your fiance likes action movies?
Yes.
Don't let her go, man. don't let her don't let her go. It's such a battle with what me and the wife pick. What kind of action movies are HALEH? Are you like Marvel, DC, Star Wars?
Depends. I like mostly stories with like a real, not necessarily like real life stories, but like we watched an action movie that was it Hannah?
Oh yeah, Hannah, but it was from. There's a couple of different films named Hannah. This one was from a few years ago. Had Eric Bana, Kate Blanchett, and she enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
And they just did I think Prime, either Prime or Hulu did a series a series reboot. But I saw the Eric Bana movie version. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, she liked that one. We talked about watching the series, but it's we're on the fence about that.
Yes, sure. I wasn't sure if I could. I don't know if I had enough patience to to watch a series about that. But Jason Bourne.
Yes, yeah.
I really like that. So that kind of action movie that they have a good fight choreography. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
It's so much over the top, or like way far from reality.
Sure.
I know it's movie, it's made up, but still somehow it has to match with what is the real life standards.
Sure.
She likes the grittier, you know, a bit more of a truthful. It almost, well, when you watch porn, you get almost a documentary feel, something in a sort of weird sense. It's almost like watching. It just has a brutality to it that feels like it's more based in life. And so when we're picking out films, if it happens to be an action one, like mentioned, we watched The Help the other night, and we switch back and forth. It isn't strictly that, but you know, she has a preference more towards that. I like Marvel stuff a little bit, some.
Depends.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Iron
Yeah.
Iron Man, Doctor Strange.
I love Iron Man, especially the first one. I really said I think 5 times. And Doctor Strange, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Well, I'm back to reality in more realistic action films. I think what Christopher Nolan did with the Dark Knight series, Batman Begins, and really placing it into a more conceivable, realistic environment, like
right.
where and then what's funny is there's this show called Person of Interest with Jim Caviezel.
Oh, I knew.
Yeah. And they call that pretty much the actual real life Batman. If a rich guy, if a real, like a billionaire, financed a specialist to help people, and it really is like the real world Batman. And that's another good one to check out.
That's interesting. I've never actually really watched that. I've seen like trailers and stuff. I've never actually watched that. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's but my big beef with that show, it's one of those shows where the star starts getting sucked into this monotonous acting style. You know the way you know the way David Caruso was criticized on CSI Miami, where he just did everything the same exact way. And Jim Caviezel ended up just whispering his lines every episode. He just whispers, and then you know, like the star of the show is just, you know, since it's just this 9-to-5 job now, this acting, this show, he just finds these 3 different techniques for 3 different kind of emotions or temperaments throughout each episode, and it's either whispering or yelling, or I think just being quiet. I don't know. It's just especially
tough thing to shake up. Yeah.
Say again.
Well, it's a tough thing to kind of shake up and do. I know just doing we've done a film called Batman Into the Abyss. We've done Batman Requiem for a Bat, and the current one we're doing, which is Dawn of Fear. And I got to say, one of the toughest characters to play and actually not have it seem monotonous is a Bruce Wayne Batman character. That is tough to do, and not because when you go into it, everybody has their own concept of what they want it to look like. Some of it is towards the 1960s with Adam West. Some of it is more towards the Nolan films. Some of it like it more of the style of Batman v Superman with Ben Affleck. And it's a weird sort of place to be. It's sort of like having to write a modern day Star Wars film. Nobody's going to be completely happy with it. And it's a tough thing to shake that character up to where it doesn't feel monotonous and like everything he does is exactly the same. To add some depth to it to where he feels like a human being is hard. It's very hard. And on each of the sets, I mean, thankfully I get along with the directors well enough to where we can do that and play with it a little. It doesn't feel like I'm going to fight with them and, you know, the claws come out over it, but at the same time, everybody writes it differently, and then they're like, no, you're just calm and this and that, and don't show any emotion here, don't do that. And I'm just like, you know, it's kind of hard because you want to add some depth to it, so it doesn't feel like what you're describing with Jim Caviezel's character, where it just is like, okay, is he ever going to do anything different? I mean, is there development? Is there a character arc? Does he end up in a different place at the end of the series or episodes? Yeah. And that's a tough thing to do, especially if we get into more established characters and people have preconceived notions of it. You can't get away from it sometimes. It's a fight. So yeah, I loved all the Nolan ones. But I almost felt like that almost happened towards the end of that. People started making fun of Christian Bale's Batman voice. Yeah. At the end, you know, because he sounds so if you notice in the first film, it's kind of almost like, oh, he's gritty. It's kind of refreshing and it's different. And he's, you know, and then I felt like by the time the third film came around, I was like, oh man, that just sounds weird. Has he got laryngitis? What's the problem here? Yeah. I mean, you know, it almost sounded too gravelly and raspy. And then people started making fun of it. And then you think, well, how do you get around that? That's got to be such a tough thing to get around and keep the story going and not have things just go way downhill. Anyway. I'm going on about it. No, yeah. No, I remember when everybody was making fun of his Batman voice, and I think what you know, the Batfleck films, they found a workaround with a voice modulator, and so it was, you know, that's how they figured, okay, and maybe Ben Affleck insisted on it. He didn't want to, of all the other things he was getting made fun of, he didn't want to get made fun of for his Batman voice. So let's just. Let's put a voice modulator inside his bat mask, and you know, that'll do it. That'll cover up his voice. That'll hide his identity. You know, speaking of very realistic, you know, gritty action movies, and I mentioned this movie a couple of times on my podcast, and it's called Avengement with Scott Adkins. I think you can find it, if not on Netflix, you can find it on Hulu or Vudu. I don't know if you have Vudu, but it's a free service. But, you know, I think it is still on Netflix though. But anyway, Avengement with Scott Adkins. I'm not sure if you know who that is. He was actually I'm familiar with him. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few things he's done. Mostly smaller parts in some of the films that we watched. There was one that we watched that he was an agent in it, but he was not. He wasn't the main role. But he primarily does martial arts films, right? That's his background, right?
Yeah, he wrote, produced this one, stars in it, and you know the last 30 minutes is just amazing. Like, just it's just nonstop. Basically, it's just the worst, the worst bar fight ever filmed, but it's yeah, it's worth the watch. So what we kind of touched on your agenda. I know we got a couple of other projects, but in the works. But what's your view of the new normal?
View of the new normal. I don't know. Well, I guess it's kind of a. I don't know what the new normal is going to be. We don't really know.
Well, I don't think it has been ever normal. I don't know. It depends on what you call it normal. For me, it's how you see everything and how, like, even with this COVID-19, it's just, I've been watching some, even from doctors' point of view, it's just, it depends on how everybody handles the situation. I think as long as each of us do our part, that will go better. I guess that's how, as a, you know, as a nurse, that's how I see it. That if each of us do what we are supposed to, and not even with this virus, it's just with everything that the daily life, I think, needs to be like that because we have to protect ourselves every day since we walk out the door and until we go back home. It's just it has to be every day that we're protecting ourselves and our family, and not because of like something hits and like COVID-19 or some kind of flu that we have to take more precautions. And that's how I see it. It's, for me, it's just it's pretty much the same if we do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and especially for me and the wife brought home a baby boy 5 months ago, and so
Yeah.
like you said, Steve, it's all remote work for me for a while. And she's a teacher, and she was doing the Zoom teaching, you know, in the spring up until the summer. And there's a lot of different states and different counties doing different things, and she's really on edge about, you know, how our county is going to handle things. And luckily for right now, we've got another, I think, semester. Right now it's Zoom, and she's happy about that because you just don't know what other people are doing and what the people, and you especially don't know, you know, it's 6 degrees. You know, this whole thing, 6 degrees of separation, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. But even with COVID, it's probably 2 degrees. It's only 2 degrees. You know, I knew somebody that had it, and I don't know if they still have it. And now we're freaking out, and we're like, okay, everybody that knows her needs to get tested. But I know 5 other people and been around 5 other people that know her. And so, you know, she got tested. She came back negative, thank God. But that very next step to her came back positive. So
wow. Yeah.
So with COVID, it's not 6 degrees. It's like 2, you know, maybe 3, but it's like, it's definitely within the 2 to 3 degrees of separation.
Well, yeah, you're thinking about just even during a regular flu season, how fast that moves around.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it just jumps from person to person to person. Every other person seems like they have it. It's, you know, it moves pretty much about the same way. It's pretty quick, and boom, you know, several people, you know, could have it. A whole household could have it. And if somebody in the same household gets it, does everybody else get it? You know, and how fast do people know? I mean, there's so many variables. It's a tough one. I mean, thankfully, all the film stuff, that any of the film stuff I've done where I've been on set at all, which has been very minimal. Well, I knew everybody that was there, and everybody that was there knew they weren't infected. They knew they hadn't been exposed, or they knew from having been tested that they didn't have it. And the crew all still wore masks. The actors only took them off when, well, when we were doing our scenes and we actually had to be in front of the camera. That was the only time we weren't wearing face masks. Shoot, I actually had a picture somewhere of me in the Batman mask wearing a face mask. That was
over the Batman mask.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, we definitely have to talk offline, talk some shop, because I have me and some colleagues, we just released our second seasons of, well, one show's based in the DC universe, one show's based in the Marvel universe, but
Oh, wow.
but they're produced in the style of those of the crime shows, like that you might see on ID and Reels, you know, Who Killed Django.
Okay.
Yeah, and so basically we found a way to make every episode an origin story of an obscure villain, but it's produced in the same style as, you know, those, you know, lower budget America's Most Wanted crime reenactment, you know, docudrama, yeah, crime reenactment shows that are like, so you know, we definitely got to talk shop after this. But if you and HALEH had any, HALEH, right? I am pronouncing that right, HALEH.
Yeah.
Okay. If you know, 1 point from each of you, if you had 1 point, one last bit of advice, one main bit of advice for our viewers, what would that be?
You go first.
Oh, me first. I'm on the spot. One main point of advice, if I were to say it about filmmaking, if it's somebody that's even just getting started during the whole thing that's happening now, it's basically to persevere, hang in there, and things will get to a point to where we have some semblance of normalcy. It may not ever be completely exactly the same, but you know, everything's always shifting. I mean, filmmaking over the last 15 to 20 years has shifted into digital. We were having, we visited with some friends last night that he was telling me he learned filmmaking and editing back in the days when it was actual film and cutting and splicing and doing all that, and then he had to totally how different an animal it is to do it digitally and on a computer. And I never was involved in any of that back then. I was only involved in, you know, the current iteration with digital and everything. And just if I were to give any advice, it wouldn't be just persevere. It would be always stay learning. Always learn beyond just the stuff that you know as far as filmmaking, so that you can develop yourself completely into really an accomplished storyteller. Because filmmaking is storytelling through a visual medium, and if you always stay open like that and you never get closed off, you can grow and develop and pick up so many things from so many other people that really round you out, because it doesn't ever stay the same. It doesn't stay theirs when you pick it up from them. You add your own flavor to it, your own take.
Mm-hmm.
And so staying open and always learning is a big thing. In fact, I would say that's the biggest hiccup for most of the filmmakers or people involved in the industry that I've ever seen. They stop. They think, oh, well, I've got all that figured out. I don't need to do anything. That's not the way you do that. And I'm like, no, there's no such thing as that's not the way. You have to experiment and go beyond it. And we treat every film shoot like it's an experiment. When we get in there, it never stays exactly the same. And I can't tell you how many times we have taken our shot list or our storyboard concepts, and they got scrapped. Because we got in there, we got to looking at everything. It was like, the lighting is terrible. This is terrible. Let's change it up and try it this way. We'll try it the way the storyboard did it, but then we'll try it this other way. And it worked great. And a lot of that was just always learning and never being super fixed to something. It doesn't mean don't have a plan, but it's a great mindset to have. And I'm going to shut up now, or I'll keep going.
Yeah, and HALEH, but before you go, I mean, I there's a lot of projects that I had in the works, you know, prepped. The 2 crime shows, we had our second seasons already in the can, shot, but we already had that production hack. Where I said, you know, of course I want to make Avengers Endgame or Infinity Wars, or I want to make, you know, Dawn of Justice. I want to make big budgeted films that are in the theater, obviously, but you know, we don't have the money for that. We're independent filmmakers. We're starting off. So here's the production hack. It's like a crime show. And so once quarantine hit, I had everything in the can. So it was just, it took me maybe 3 weeks to just cut everything and schedule it and release it on my channel. But then there were other projects where I only had, you know, a third of this in the can, or a third of that in the can. And I decided, okay, well, you know, we could do this as, we can kind of go back to those radio serials, or we could produce it as a motion comic, or, you know, like an audio documentary, or something, you know, do it somewhat differently, because you have to, and there was another film where I was an AD on, and there was a scene where it was a flag football game. The scene was, it was a flag football game between Marines and FBI, and they wanted, you know, 50 other Marines and FBI in the stand, you know, cheering on each side. And based on time, based on money, I said, listen, could this be an indoor basketball game? And instead of, well, I mean, how many people are on the field with a football game? It's like 10 on each side, right? But with a basketball game, it's 5 on each side. And if it was an indoor little small basketball court at the gym at Quantico, then who's going to be in the stands? Maybe 20 people, 10 Marines, 10 FBIs cheering on their teams. And it's like, keep an open mind. You're still going to get how badass these characters are. And because there's a Marine and an FBI that get in each other's face, and the female FBI, you know, clocks them, shows just to show, and the point of that was to show how, you know, tough she is, and she doesn't take any shit, and blah 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 blah. And so we can still get the same point across,
right?
But it's not this huge football field. They're playing flag football. It's a smaller, but yeah, I couldn't agree.
Well, yeah, I like that too. You're writing your scenes around your character development, which I can't tell you how many people I've run into, and they're just like, they have scenes that are what I call filler. They're just action for the sake of action, or drama for the sake of drama, and it doesn't have anything to do with that. I mean, shoot, even if we do an altercation or a fight scene or something like that, every move that each character makes is a defining moment of what their character is. Like, would they do this? Wouldn't they do this? Literally everything they do, how they throw a punch, all the way down to whether they would pick up a gun and shoot you, or whether they would try and hold you at a distance and leave the area, just is defined by their character. So everything that they're doing defines their character. So it's all a part of the storytelling. It's
exactly, but
big deal. It's definitely a big deal. Anyway.
No, absolutely. And like you said, right around the character, whether she's playing football, flag football, or indoor basketball,
right?
You know, there's still that point where she clocks somebody in the mouth, and that's the important moment. She clocked this guy in the mouth because he was too rough. He was being cocky. He was being arrogant. He was being chauvinist.
Puts him in his place.
But you know, it's whether she's playing basketball or football. HALEH, one last point, one last bit of advice. What's your take?
I'm just going to add to what Steve said, that not just filmmaking, anything that you like. It's just, you have to work very hard for it. You have to learn every day, and don't let the negative feedbacks stops you from what you're doing. And it doesn't have to be very big. Nothing starts big in the first day. Nothing happens overnight. It's just everyday work, everyday effort. Otherwise, it doesn't happen.
Absolutely, yeah. And I just had this conversation yesterday where I was debating with some colleagues about some of the projects I'm working on the side here. And it's like, listen, again, we don't have $1 million, but one of them is, well, two of them are big in investing, and they've jumped on the whole stock thing and using Robinhood during the quarantine. And I said, well, I'm looking at your portfolio. Why didn't you just invest $1 million into these stocks to make $100 million? And he goes, well, I don't have $1 million. I'm like, exactly. I have an idea. I have a story, but I came up with a different way. Instead of you investing $1 million in Robinhood, you start off with 100, and you threw in a little extra, threw in another 50, you threw in another 200, you threw in another 50. You were real smart with it. And so, when we were out shooting like these little, super indie passion projects, I thought about like, okay, what can we get away with, and how can we work around this, and we do this and that project might get someone's attention, and that attention grows, and then put out 2 more projects that are a little bit more, highly produced, a little bit more bigger budgeted. It gets more attention and it grows. It's an investment. It's an investment in your art. It's an investment in your life. It's an investment in your passions, as well as, finances, and so you don't wait. You're not a 10-year-old with, well, there are a couple 10-year-olds with $100 million, but not every 10-year-old has $100 million to just drop $1 million into an investment, or drop $1 million into a film, and then, win an Oscar or make $1 billion back, or whatever the case. So you're right.
But I mean, too, like you were saying, it's way better if you take your time and you develop and grow it. I mean, we've had stuff on our YouTube channel reach millions of views, but it took time, and we had to develop and tweak things, creatively, money-wise, like with some of the recent stuff that we've done with Batman, or upcoming set pieces and film pieces for Last Generation. It has been, like you said, workarounds and hacks so that you can make something look good without spending a ton of money at it, because throwing money at it sometimes prevents you from using your, not just your creativity, but, just your common sense to find a workaround that is much better. And I feel like it's important to never lose that, because even if you get into bigger productions, you don't want to spend more money on something that you could spend less on, have it look good, and not, just be burning cash to try and get something done. I mean, I'll have to, if we connect after this, I'll have to send you some pictures of how we designed and built a bat cave for the recent film that we did, how we did that without spending an insane amount of money. I mean, we spent some, but we did it in a way that it was safe. It looked really, really good. It was really simple to do. And some of the hacks of it came from somebody else that was using it for a completely different idea. And I contacted them and said, hey, I'm going to alter this, do this, and do this. How did you do that? How did you make certain aspects of this work? And I kind of improved on the idea or changed it for what we needed. And that's how we did it. We built a whole cave, almost, almost every direction you looked, there was about less than a fourth of a wall that was left out for the cameras and people to get in, and certain walls that we created that we could move, and things that we could do. And shoot, we've even done breakaway walls where people have to fall through or land on, with foam block that's designed to look like cinder block, very inexpensively gotten through Home Depot. And I got that idea from a professional set construction that I watched, and just kind of shrank the concept down, made it something smaller, much more affordable, and then we were able to do it for probably about a fraction of the cost. But it's those hacks that let us kind of reach the level, just because, I mean, all the editing and all the cameras and everything that we have access to now that we didn't have access to 15 years ago is now at our fingertips. So if we can figure out the other hacks, we can make pretty high-end productions without having to throw huge amounts of cash. And I've seen guys do that. I'm sure you have too, guys that will people that'll come in and do filmmaking, and they'll contact me and say, I want to throw 15 grand at this and 20 grand at that, and I'm just, it's a concept that they have, and well, you need to stop and think this through, and then of course there's the ones that have no money and no desire to find any workarounds and are just lazy and they want you to do everything for them. So you've got both ends of the crazy spectrum there. But yeah, we'll definitely have to touch base after this. I want to hear about some of the other projects you were talking about too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, HALEH and Steve, thanks so much for coming on the show. Before you go, any links, socials, plugs you want to put out there?
Sure. I have a group on Facebook, First Light Productions, Third Sun Films. It's like news releases, so all of our stuff's going to come up through there. And HALEH has a Facebook page, a fan page under.
Yes, fan page under my name, HALEH SABERI.
And you already have the full spelling of that. And I have a film page. I don't do a personal page anymore. I just have a film page, but it's under Steve James. And I'm also easily able to be found on Instagram too. I mean, if you go look, and YouTube is probably one of the biggest presences that I have as far as stuff that's released publicly. Anything that I do that is fan film related or something ends up on there, as opposed to like Amazon. The obvious venues. So
awesome. Well, don't go anywhere. I'm gonna sign off, but stick around. We'll talk some shop after the show. But HALEH and Steve, thanks again for coming on the show. It was a blast. I think we put a lot of good stuff out there. And to my viewers, you know what to do. Thanks for watching, and check us out next time.
All right, great. Thanks for having us.